I think in the big urban conurbations, that's already happening in the UK. I think in the smaller cities and towns, that it's more likely that if we can get our local authorities to start thinking about the future and planning for it, that we ought to be able to populate it as a community hub for the people. Only if it's part of a complete vision. Parking in itself as a subject has become, as you rightly say, it's a revenue generator for cash-strapped local authorities, so they can only see pound notes when you talk parking. What they don't see is the broader picture of the future of the town that commercially needs to respond to modern technology. The library needs to be at the heart of it. We need to get the towns wired up in a different way, free Wi-Fi throughout the town, no black spots, and parking and accessibility needs to be free for the first 2 hours and a part of the commercial mix. Now that means bringing public and private enterprise together in that planning process for the future in order to create a town centre that can cope with the 21st century. Well, I think they're already starting to understand the change, but as they recognise that the heyday is over, in the sense that it's still going to have new development and it is going to be in the big malls, but they're going to be fewer and concentrated with fewer property companies. The vast majority of medium-sized property owners and private landlords will realise that as their commercial retail premises no longer has the value that it used to have as a capital growth mechanism. It will no longer have the value as a revenue generator because it won't be able to get anyone to rent it. So you need to change the use, and that means that local authorities have to have powers in order to do that, and they also need to recognise that if they don't change, that local authorities can use compulsory purchase to actually move it on and change a street into a full residential street because it's a sub-high street, move the good retailers into the mainstream and change it that way. So I think we're at the point now where there's so much pressure coming on the property constituency that they're going to have to realise that they're going to have to change. Well, I didn't mention business rates in my presentation today, and I could have done, but our trouble is business rates in itself is a presentation. It's a tax that has morphed into a monster. It's the only tax that relentlessly goes up regardless of economic conditions, and the fact that this government also delayed the revaluation for 2 years, and that means that all of the rates are based on the valuation that was last done and implemented. It was done in 2008, implemented 2010, so it was done at the height of the market, and it means that there's a disparity across the country where the North, the Midlands and the South West in particular are paying rates today that are totally unsustainable and totally unrealistic, and yet in Bond Street, which is now the most expensive high street to retail in outside of Manhattan, it is still paying rates based on a valuation of 2008, so they're making a fortune, and that was a big mistake, and that needs to be dealt with very quickly, and hopefully if there is a change of government, one of the recommendations we'll put forward is that you do a regional mechanism to switch that and get that fairness back into play as quickly as you can. But business rates as a subject, no question, it needs a root and branch review, and it needs to be replaced by something else. One of the recommendations in the Grimsey review is that because the high street and town centres and retail as an industry is bigger than health, it's bigger than defence, It's bigger than education in terms of how much money is tied up in it in terms of loans, working capital, people employed. And yet we don't have a minister in the cabinet responsible for town centres. And that's the number one recommendation in the Grimsey review. I think it's important that there is somebody sitting around the table talking about how we get local economic blueprints into our towns and cities around the country, because they will reflect the economy. I use the phrase quite often that UK High Street is a reflection of the UK economy, or actually the UK economy is a reflection of the High Street. Because we're a consumer-led society, so it does need strong leadership. Well, I think it's going to change the retail model immensely. I think I mentioned during my presentation just now fashion and the working capital that is required for fashion today in buying full season stock ahead of the season, shipping it into the UK, starting at one price and then reducing, etc., and selling out early of sizes and stuff like that. I think technology will enable the customer to take the power. They can even become designers. I think fashion stores won't have stock in them. There'll be experiences, rather like the Apple store is today. And who knows, I think perhaps there'll even be orders placed and product made in the UK and dispatched. So I think that's just fashion. That you could let your mind meander around all other sectors in retail and put together mix and matches of the model. The fact is that we will migrate to using our mobile devices to do the kind of stuff that we do today, going to shops. And I don't hold with this argument that there are certain stuff that you can't go to the high street. You have to go to the high street for, like having your hair cut. I mean, that's true, and that's why it needs to be a community hub, and there needs to be other things there, and lots of good independents maybe selling quirky stuff, and arts, crafts and all that sort of stuff is probably going to survive. But the mainstream consumer activity is going to change immeasurably in the future, and it's wonderfully exciting. I'd love to be around to be a part of it.